Tip number 2 is to collect something that you love and put it on display. We all have a unique personality and we all have our own unique style. So when it comes to interior decorating your home, it's extremely important that you celebrate that style. And one of the ways that you can do that is by collecting something that you love and putting it on display. Collecting something that you love and putting it on display not only reminds you of things that you love, but it also gives people who are guests or people who you know and love insight into things that you value, things that you are passionate about, or experiences that you have had before. So don't be shy, celebrate who you are, collect a few items, curate it appropriately, and put it on display. So you may be wondering, what's the difference between collecting versus hoarding, curating versus just having a ton of stuff, right? Curation is the thoughtful configuration or the thoughtful assortment of a group of items that tell a complementary story. So that complementary story may be by color, it may be by theme. So an example would be as all safari items that you may collect, or it may be a travel theme. There has to be one consistent and common thread amongst all of the items that you are pulling together for it to be considered a curation. You may be wondering, I have 50 great things or 100 great things that I love that I've collected over the years. Which ones do I actually decide to feature? Well, first, it depends on the amount of space that you actually have. So the real estate actually dictates how big you want your curated display to be. So my recommendation is that if you have a large wall space or you have a room to dedicate to it, then you can obviously go big. But for most of us, like myself, who lives in an apartment, I really don't have that much space. So I would say that if you don't have a lot of real estate in your home to be able to identify the curated assortment, the first thing that you do is you choose the item that you are most passionate about. So you may be wondering, I have a ton of different interests from swimming to traveling to cooking and food. And how do I choose which interest I want to be able to curate as a narrative for my house? It's really all about your space. But let's start off with a small apartment. You want to be able to curate something and put it on display, and you have multiple interests. You have these 3 interests. What is the thing that you couldn't live without? That would be my recommendation. What is the first thing that you would want people to know about you? So personally for me, the thing that I have chosen to curate and collect is coffee table books. I'm obsessed with art and haven't always been able to afford the art pieces that I want. So by being able to have a book that I can visually go back and reference and look at that actually highlights whether it's fashion, destinations that I like to go to, and even art that I can't afford has been something that I've collected. What's interesting about coffee table books for me is that they not only are decorative, but they've also become very functional too. So I use them often on like console tables to be able to be used as risers for little decor and decorative objects. And I've even curated my books a little bit differently based off of where they're placed. The ones that I love that are larger and more interesting, I actually have in my living room, on my living room table. And I use that as a great punctuation piece. They're organized in a great quadrant, so 4 stacks of books. And I wanted to really focus on things that I am most passionate about. So specific artists like Andy Warhol and Jackson Pollock, or even designers that I know and love. Then my second set of books I actually keep behind the sofa on a console table, and that's the one that I use as a riser. So I use it to be able to display a great little sculpture that I had collected. And those are smaller books, and those are actually more design-driven books that are about architecture, about interior design, or about travel destinations, but they're centered around art. And then my third and final collection I actually keep at the front door. And they're smaller books as well, but they're centered around more about travel as well as design. And that one actually has one of my favorite books. It's a pop-up book. It's interesting, it's black, red, and white, and it's one of the books that I'm most passionate about. Most people who come to my home, it's either the first thing that I show or it's the last thing. It's really a great way for me to share with my guests and loved ones my personality, which is a little bit kooky, a little bit eccentric, easygoing, but crafty and innovative and creative. So I love my books, and I've separated them based off of things that I'm passionate about, and I've placed them in places that are visible and that also allow me an opportunity to speak to them as I'm showing my house. So now that you've identified one or two things that you'd like to be able to curate and put on display in your house, you may be wondering, how do I curate? What's the first step? Where do I begin? Well, the first step to curating is to define a focal point. A focal point is the centermost point of the destination or area that you are looking to make this display. And think about it like this. Your focal point is something that should draw your attention to. You should be easily drawn to it. So it should be something that is almost intuitive and natural, that you immediately see, that you are gravitated towards. So after you've defined your focal point, the second step is to understand scale and proportion, right? And you may say, what is the scale and proportion thing? It's all about size ratio. It's all about, simply put, making sure that you don't have a lot of really small things and one really big thing. You want to make sure that there is some equal distribution between the items that you've decided to put on display. So you have to think about, as you're starting to curate your assortment, and let's just say you have 25 things, part of your editing process may be making sure that the things that you actually choose are all complementary in size. So scale and proportion is extremely important when you're curating your loved items, and it provides an opportunity for you to be able to make a presentation that is easy on the eye and that feels comfortable to look at. Tip number 3 and step number 3 to curating is harmony and unity. And what's interesting is that harmony and unity go hand in hand with scale and proportion. They work very well together. So harmony is about, once you actually have created scale and proportion items, then you want to make sure that there is some harmony between either the materials, the color, how you're actually showcasing it, so that it feels like a unified story. So out of, let's say, all of your trophies, you may want to showcase all of your gold trophies, or you may want to showcase all of your yellow trophies, or you may only want to showcase all of your trophies that are lacrosse or football driven. There has to be a common thread that is visual amongst all of these items to create the harmony and unity. And that's above and beyond just size and scale. There has to be a detail that connects these items together. So step number 4 in curating your wonderful assortment in your home is to make sure that you have variety. What you don't want is, you don't want a repetitive group of items that appear to be mundane and it gets very boring. So make sure that there's some interest, and that interest may be in some of the small details. It may be a small scale variation. So we talked about scale and proportion, but this is where you may want to make sure that there's some slight variation between the two. Or what you may want to do is make sure that there is a slight color variation. So if you think about, let's just say you're collecting items that are red. You can collect items that go from primary red into burgundy into pink, and there's a gradation or variety in the color items that are red that you actually collect. So you just want a little bit more variety with the items that you're collecting, because they show more range and interest. And what's the final thing that you need to know as you're putting it on display and as you're curating it? Well, it's that you actually need to have a structure sometimes that is developed to highlight it. And that structure needs to be one that is thoughtful, one that is functional, but also one that ties and complements all of your display items. So a great example of that is if you are a collector of baseballs. Let's just say you like to collect baseballs, or you like to collect shoes. Let's just say you're a shoe collector and you have a bunch of vintage shoes or vintage baseballs that you want to put on display. Well, you have a few different ways that you can display them. You can put them all in one box, and that one box can have multiple shelves on it. So all of the shelves should be all the same width and all the same material and all the same color for uniformity. If you did not want to put it in a box, let's just say that you wanted to actually display them on all individual shelves on a wall, then each of those individual shelves need to be equally spaced apart. They need to be the exact same material and they need to be the exact same color. That display structure and the material and the color is extremely important, and keeping it consistent is even more important because it allows for the uniformity of the presentation to be simplified so that you can actually just focus on the things that you love the most. So once you've identified the things that you want to curate or the thing that you want to curate, you may be saying, Eric, I just have really one room. I have one room that I want to be able to use as a curation display opportunity, but I have 3 things that I'm super passionate about that I want to put on display. How do I choose which one do I choose, and how many do I actually place in your room? Well, this is where I live by the rules here, guys. And the rule is choose one thing. You have to have one thing per room that you want to celebrate, highlight, and elevate to a curated display. It has to be something that is extremely meaningful to you, and it's extremely important that that one thing be a representation of who you are. You want it to be super clear, and you want your guest and you to be laser focused. You don't want competing ideas. So if you think about when we discussed that it has to have harmony and it has to have unity and there has to be flow and balance and symmetry and all of those things, when you layer in 2 different curated assortments, inherently they will not be harmonious, right? So there has to be a level of purity and simplicity to what you put on display and what you actually focus. So you have to make the tough decision and choose the one thing that you want to celebrate and highlight in one room and show it. So you may say, how do I do this on a budget? It's really important to know that sometimes the most interesting things for you to collect are the most simple things. And you can't view a collectible or something that you want to curate and put on display as something that is expensive. And I'll give you a great example. In addition to my coffee table books that I'm obsessed with, which you know that I love, I'm an art collector. I actually love art. And like this discussion, I don't have a ton of money to be able to collect one of my favorite artists, which is Andy Warhol. I've started to collect art books by him. But more importantly, what I did is Campbell Soup actually did a partnership with the Andy Warhol Foundation, and they took some of his most famous works and actually had them wrap Campbell Soup cans. Well, when I saw this in the grocery store, I was like, oh my God, I gotta buy this. I gotta buy this because this is like the perfect fusion of pop art and commerce and Andy Warhol, which is everything that he was about. And it's the artwork that I actually love. So I purchased 6 Campbell Soup cans, which were limited edition, but not expensive at all. They were like $1.29, but they didn't do a really large run. And I decided to curate them as a set of 6, put them in a shadow box, which is essentially just a display box, and actually have it mounted to my wall in my home. So I decided to curate something that celebrated something that I love, which is art, specifically Andy Warhol, and I elevated something that is common and everyday, like a Campbell Soup can, to a display and art level. So Display and curating something that you actually love does not have to be expensive. It just needs to be something that you're truly passionate about, and don't underestimate the simple, common, everyday things that you either frequently use, that you are most familiar with, or that are part of your family tradition or heritage. Everyone can curate. So please, guys, do not be intimidated by this. And so I'm saying that everyone can curate because even if you haven't identified the things that you love, you have multiples of items in your house that you can actually configure in a way so that it looks like a curated, thoughtful display. So some of you who are wine drinkers like me, you have multiple wine bottles. It's all about how you arrange them and where you place them in your house that makes it look like a celebrated display. So let's just say you're not a wine drinker and you are more of someone who's into flowers and plants, and you have a patio that you actually have a few different potted plants. So instead of placing them one in every corner of the patio, group them together in a curated way, which means that you find a focal point, you add harmony, meaning that all of the pot either materials or all of the pot colors or the pot heights and sizes are all together, which makes it look like a curated display. Or let's just say you are into culinary delights and you are a chef or you are a aspiring chef and you have a lot of either cutlery or you have a lot of pots and pans. If you have an opportunity to be able to display your pots and pans, then that's an opportunity for you to showcase something that you know and love that's practical that you may not have ever thought of. And finally, the most easiest way to curate if you aren't ready to be able to make a commitment on showing your personal style is your drinking glasses. I know that sounds crazy, but we all drink every day some beverage, and as you open up your cabinet doors to your glasses, you can organize them in a way so that they feel curated. You want to make sure that those drinking glasses actually are either all from the same color or have a similar detail, and then you want to organize them in a way so that the various scales are proportionate to one another. So those simple moments of curation that may be just personal to you or your other family members, you can enjoy before you're ready to make that big commitment and actually create a truly personal curated display for your home. So you may be saying, Eric, how do I start to curate? I haven't started yet. And I'm super intimidated by this. This is like a daunting thing to do. One, you just told me how to do it. You told me where to find it and how to determine what I would want to curate. And I'm overwhelmed. And my recommendation to you is do it over time. If you're curating something that is a three-dimensional narrative of things that you love, things that you value, things that you are inspired by, don't rush. There's no rush to do it. These things should be items that you are passionate about, things that you love, and things that truly have meaning to you. So it is extremely important that you take your time and that you properly select things that truly have meaning to you. So don't feel obligated to rush. Don't think that this is a fast overnight weekend shopping trip to be able to create this curated assortment. Remember, this is your narrative. This is something that is personal to you and it is representative of who you are. It took you a lifetime to be able to become the person who you are today. It won't take overnight to be able to find items to represent your journey and who you are. So it's okay, take your time.